this is Lord's Legion and welcome to another countdown, and in this video we're going to be counting down the top 10 cancelled comic book films I would like to watch at least once. Now there are a wide variety of cancelled comic book films over the years, and each of these films are very interesting for one reason or another, whether these films would turn out to be any good or whether they're just going to be completely weird. But for curiosity's sake, if I was ever to go in some parallel universe in which I could watch some of these cancelled comic book films, then I would be incredibly keen in watching what the final product could potentially have been. So without further ado, let's begin with this list. So kicking off the list at number 10 we have Jack Black's Green Lantern. Now there's no denying that the Green Lantern film that we eventually got in 2011 was absolutely terrible. But if we were to get this version of Green Lantern instead, then this would have been all the more entertaining for better or for worse. I mean, for starters we have Jack Black, and do you really think that he could pull off a Green Lantern? And not to mention that his character would not be Hal Jordan nor any of the previous Green Lanterns that came before in the comics. And if this isn't far away from the original source material enough, you have to have this film to be a complete parody of the Green Lantern universe essentially. Where we have Jack Black's Green Lantern creating constructs in which form into a condom in order to capture criminals. Now I know for a fact that if we were to have this film instead, then this will probably join the ranks with Catwoman as one of the worst comic book films of all time. However, I feel like with this film, it will probably be something in a similar vein to Batman and Robin, where yes it is shitty, but it is still funny to laugh at. Coming in at number 9, we have X-Men Origins Magneto. Now this film was originally going to come out after X-Men Origins Wolverine, and as you could imagine from the title, this will revolve around the upbringing of Eric Lancia, in which he more or less becomes a Nazi slayer. And although this film was actually cancelled, a lot of the elements from the original script for this film was ultimately revisited for X-Men First Class. And not only would the original be more Magneto-centric in comparison to First Class, but it was also meant to be a much darker film in nature. Now if this film was to exist, and it would be pretty interesting to see how the comic book film genre would change, seeing as this would potentially be the first supervillain film to ever come out, unless you're gonna count Catwoman, in which, why would you? But either way, if I saw the final product for X-Men Origins Magneto, then it would be very interesting to see what angle they would have went with this character and compare it to First Class. Coming in at number 8, we have Batman vs Superman, the 2003 version. And if you thought Dawn of Justice was very depressing and stupid, then this takes it to a whole new level. Because in this version, we don't have Alfred, the Joker, Commissioner Gordon, or Robin, as all of them are dead, while Superman and Lois Lane are actually divorced. And after the Joker comes back from the dead, in which was actually a clone the whole time, Batman comes out of retirement so that he can kill the Joker, and then Superman comes out of his retirement just so that he can kick both of their asses. And then it turns out that Lex Luthor was the one who cloned the Joker and orchestrated the whole thing, and then it's just completely ridiculous. Like, this version of Batman vs Superman would have been even more of a train wreck than the one we ended up getting, and in that case, I'm actually interested in seeing how this would actually turn out, because this one is bizarre on so many levels. Coming in at number 7, we have Spider-Man 4. Now this is rather interesting because in this new established trilogy, this was going to follow the similar footsteps to Lord of the Rings, with Spider-Man's 4, 5 and 6 would paint this one massive story arc. And if you thought Spider-Man 3 was incredibly packed on villains, then this takes it to another level. Because we have John Malkovich, who would have portrayed the Vulture, and Hathaway, who would become either the Black Cat or the Vultress, maybe both. And we would have finally got the introduction of Kirk Connors as the Lizard. Now Spider-Man 4 would have been marked as the redemption for the Sam Raimi's film series. And I believe that Spider-Man 6 would inevitably lead up to the Sinister Six. And what's a huge shame about this is the fact that days before shooting the film, it got cancelled because Sam Raimi didn't like the script. And if Spider-Man 4 did exist in today's standards, then this will be very interesting to see how this film would impact the comic book genre. So for number 6 we have Del Toro's Doctor Strange. Now not much is really known about this project, however it's safe to assume that this would be very similar to the final product. But why I wanted to include this one is the fact that Del Toro is incredible when it comes down to creating a unique world as well as amazing creature designs. And with a character like Doctor Strange, then this is right up Del Toro's street. And if this was to come from Del Toro, then I could imagine that Doctor Strange would have went for a much darker angle. Now from what I've heard, Del Toro left the project because of creative differences, but if Marvel allowed Del Toro to just be creative with Doctor Strange, then we would have had something incredible, and that is no shots firing at what we ended up getting. So for number 5 we have Green Arrow Escape from Supermax. Now out of all these films on this list, this one is probably the one that I would want to exist the most, because the concept behind this one is very unique and something that hasn't been done before. After getting framed for murder, Oliver Queen gets sent to Supermax, which then leads to Oliver Queen trying to escape from the prison, only for him to team up with other supervillains such as Lex Luthor and the Riddler. Now this to me just sounds so incredible, because we have Green Arrow, who is fun in his own right, who is trying to escape from a super prison which hasn't been done before, and then having Green Arrow team up with iconic DC villains is just the icing on the cake. And honestly, I think DC has made a huge mistake in cancelling this film, because this is such a unique premise, and not to mention Green Arrow is a very popular superhero right now. Coming in at number 4 we have Superman Lives. Now what's it that hasn't been said about this film already? This is such a bizarre concept that it has its own documentary on what this film could have been. This film would have been directed by Tim Burton, and out of everyone you could have picked for Superman, and they went with Nicolas Cage. And then on top of that, this would have been based loosely on the death and return of Superman. And not to mention, Brainiac and Doomsday would have been the villains, and at one point Superman would have went up against a giant mechanical spider. And honestly, I would highly recommend you guys in watching the documentary in relation to this film, because this documentary has such a great insight in what this film could have been. So coming in at number 3 we have Batman Triumphant / Batman Unchained. Now I think it's safe to assume that Batman Triumphant would have been Batman's equivalent of Superman Lives, because this film gives Superman Lives a run for its money in terms of how crazy this really is. Now Batman Triumphant would have been the sequel to Batman and Robin, where we would have had Nicolas Cage as the Scarecrow, Madonna of all people to portray Harley Quinn, who would turn out to be the Joker's daughter, and in some versions of the script we would have also had Man-Bat. But the most craziest thing about it is Batman would have been infected by the Joker's fear toxins and would ultimately see all of his old enemies such as the Joker, Penguin, Catwoman, Riddler, Two-Face, Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy and Bane. And what's even crazy about this is the fact that the whole idea of the Joker reappearing in the form of fear toxins has actually transferred over to Batman Arkham Knight. Intentional or not, this is pretty insane. Coming in at number 2 we have Justice League Mortal. Now in a similar fashion to Spider-Man 4, this film almost existed, but only got cancelled because of the writer's strike back in the day. Now this film would have been based loosely on the Tower of Babel storyline, where instead of Ra's al Ghul, it turns out to be Maxwell Lord, who uses all of Batman's contingency plans to knock out all the Justice League one by one. And then we have the ending in which Batman actually does snap Maxwell Lord's neck, which would have ended up having the similar backlash that Man of Steel had back when it got released. Now this film to me is very interesting because this was back in the day before even the Marvel Cinematic Universe was a thing. And if this movie came out, then this would have crushed Marvel even more. Because if this film came out, then I don't think anyone would give a shit about the Avengers. And if this film did came out, then this film would have changed the comic book genre in such a huge way. And finally for number 1 we have James Cameron's Spider-Man. Now if we ever got this version of Spider-Man, then this film would have done what Tim Burton's Batman did to the character. And that would be to essentially turn Spider-Man into a much darker character. A character who would swear like a sailor and also have sex on top of the Brooklyn Bridge. Not to mention a younger Leonardo DiCaprio would have been Spider-Man. And apparently Arnold Schwarzenegger would have been Dr. Octopus, where he has this thing in which he believes that he is the original Spider-Man for some reason. And on top of that, we also would have had Electro and Sandman, which was later scrapped into just having Dr. Octopus. And I'm only scratching the surface on this one because this is a darker yet interesting take on the character. And if you want to know more about this, then just read the whole script that's just floating around online, because that is just a sight to behold. So which of these cancelled comic book films that you would like to see at least once? Comment below and share some thoughts. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.